Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I will go ahead and call this meeting of our NIAA 2025 through 2028 Realignment Committee to order. It is Wednesday, February the 26th of 2025. It is 9:02 a.m. And Ms. Wonder, whenever you are ready, would you please call roll for us?
Yes. Brooke Formaster. Can you hear me?
She is not with us, but yes, I can hear you.
Joshua Katz.
Here.
Miles Baldwin.
Miles just came in the room as you said that.
David Vick. Sean Fitzsimons. No. Ken Parker.
Here.
Mike Brooks.
Here.
Sarah Scott. Mike Kofer will be late. Xavier Inthiam.
Here.
Bob Levitt.
Sorry, here.
Oh, hello. Bart Davis.
Here.
Timothy Jackson.
Here.
Paul Anderson.
Here.
Phil Tao. Dallas Larson.
Present.
Jason Odegaard.
Present.
Rob Cha.
Here.
Wade Pearson.
Here.
Paul Sullivan. Tammy Habig. Tony Posley.
Here.
Domingo Rivera.
Here.
Isabel Sanchez. Art Anderson.
Here.
Darvel Bell. Freeman Holbrook. Chris Magram.
Here, and I just texted Darvel. He said he's logging on now, so he should be on any second.
Okay, thank you. And myself, Tia Wonder.
Thank you, Ms. Wonder. We'll move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the approval of the February 26, 2025 meeting agenda for possible action. That begins on page 6 of your packet, and we would entertain a motion. I do ask if you would, whoever makes that motion, please do make it flexible. I don't know that we're going to need a flexible agenda, but I'd rather have it and not need it.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I make the motion that we approve this agenda and make it flexible.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzine, 4A5A South. I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Polzine. We have a motion for Mr. Larson, a second for Mr. Polzine to approve the agenda for today's meeting as a flexible agenda. Any further discussion, any comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda for today. Ms. Wonder, just for housekeeping purposes, Ms. Sanchez came in, Mr. Bell came in, Ms. Formaster came in.
Got him. Thank you.
So we do have 3 additional. All right, moving on to agenda item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes from the December 3rd meeting. If we could remember back that far, that was our placement meeting for fall sports. I do want to thank Ms. Wonder for getting those meeting minutes done. Been a lot going on in these past few weeks, but I appreciate you doing that. Those meeting minutes begin on page 8. Hopefully you've had a chance to look them over. If we need to change anything, please let us know. Otherwise, we would look for a motion to approve.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I make the motion that we approve the minutes from last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzine, 4A5A South. I will second that we approve those minutes.
The dynamic duo is struck again. Mr. Larson with a motion, Mr. Polzine with a second. Any further questions, any discussion regarding the minutes from the December 3rd meeting? All those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. As another point of information, Mr. Kofer has now joined us as well in this meeting. We move on to item number 5, the minutes from the December 9th Realignment Committee meeting that we held at SECTA. Those begin on page number 15 of your packet. And we will again entertain a motion to approve those minutes. If you see something that we need to change, please let us know about that. Otherwise, we'll open it up for a motion.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I make the motion we approve those minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Jason Odegaard, 3A South, all second.
Sorry, Mr. Polzin, you weren't quick enough. Thank you, Mr. Odegaard, for the second. Mr. Larson with a motion, Mr. Odegaard with a second to approve the minutes from the December 9th Realignment Committee meeting. Any further questions or any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. That motion passes. And we move on to item number 6, committee chair and comments and announcements. Do have a couple things for you. Want to address something that we kind of dealt with in the NIAA conference over the weekend. For those of you who were there, we're starting to get some different type of proposals for sports that we haven't aligned yet. Please keep in mind that the policies and procedures part of this, we've decided everything. We've sent that to our board of control. Our board of control has approved it all. We're setting our policies and procedures throughout the remainder of this process. Basically, what we have left to get done is today we are placing 3, 4, 5A for our winter sports. When we meet again next week, that will be the appeals meeting for 3, 4, and 5. I actually had a couple of people reach out wanting to appeal that they were placed in 4A and they want to go somewhere else today. Well, they really haven't been placed in 4A yet. We haven't had that full placement. What you see in your packet is the recommendation that I and our staff have put forward to you. We will hear a couple of appeals today. Those are from schools that are locked in by enrollment, trying to move up a classification or 2 classifications. We know where they're going to be. We're not waiting for them to be placed somewhere. They're already there based on their enrollment and they want to move forward. That's just something to save us time as we go forward. We are back on Zoom, obviously, for these meetings now, as we were before. Please, if you want to make a comment, use the raise hand function. Just speak up. I can't see everybody visually while I'm sharing my screen, so that does become a little bit dicey. But if you do have something to say, just you're not going to offend me if you go ahead and jump in. Please remember that. We will do our best here with the 3 of us in this room to make sure if Mr. Jackson, Mr. Anderson have things to say, that everything's being projected through the microphone as best as can possibly be. I don't anticipate, if I can ever get done with my stuff here, I don't anticipate this being a terribly long meeting. I just don't. Next week could be a little bit different of a story. Couple things that are going to, hold us up with some discussion today, but I'm hoping we have you all out of here well before lunch. Okay, let's move on to item number 7 on our agenda, and that is public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Mr. Jackson, you were just out in the lobby, I believe. Do we have anybody here that you know of that wishes to make public comment today?
We do not.
Thank you, sir. I have not received any direct public comment by email. Ms. Wonder, I believe you can hear us in your office there. Any other committee members? Do we have anybody at our sites around the state who wishes to make public comment at this time?
I do not have anyone.
Anybody else? Okay. We move on to agenda item number 8. And this is placing 3A schools in the 4A when a sport doesn't have enough viable 3A teams. And we had discussed this might be a possibility. Let's get into the genesis of this. We've gone to an enrollment-based 3A, where we have sports that are played on both sides of the states, not really an issue. We did make allowances. Was wondering, as I'm going to interrupt myself here real quick, Mr. Bell is on his way in as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We did make allowances within the NIAA and had our board approve this to get away from needing 9 teams in order to hold a state championship. We would allow the executive director to permit a championship with fewer than 9 teams for the purposes of competitive balance. As we look at our Southern-based only sports that have the 3A listed, bowling right now only has 4 3A teams. Boulder City, Akipo, the Meadows, and Virgin Valley. Flag football would have 5 if all of those teams do field teams this year. Boys volleyball is doable with 8, again, assuming all 8 of them actually have boys volleyball teams. Mr. Larson, I'd like to bring you in on this discussion before we really get kind of off the ground here. This is something you and I talked about by phone a couple of weeks ago when I really started to notice the issue with bowling, especially when we look at a 4-team league that becomes a 4-team championship. I don't know that that's something that Boulder City, the Meadows, Virgin Valley, and Akipo, I don't want to speak for any of them, but I don't know that they'd all want to necessarily be a part of just bowling the same 3 opponents all year long and then going into a championship with them. I think, Mr. Larson, you've had a chance to talk to some of the other 3A athletic directors about this. I'd like to get your thoughts on it, sir.
Yeah, I did ask Virgin about that bowling. I don't think they're going to offer bowling. I think it was brought up, but I don't think they will. So that's down to even 3 at this point. Yeah, the conversations I've had with my coaches here at MWAPA and with the athletic directors is that we kind of feel like it's almost like the 2A schools that want to play tennis or boys volleyball. 2A doesn't offer that sport, so they have to play at the next level up and play with 3A in tennis. So that was kind of my understanding going into this was, hey, if we have leagues that are too small, we're gonna have to do the same thing in those sports where the 3A isn't a level, so we all play up one level.
Mr. Odegaard, your school's obviously affected by this, Pahrump Valley as well. We have you listed for flag football and for boys volleyball as programs you're going to offer. Those are newer programs at Pahrump Valley, and hopefully they are able to field full programs in those. Your thoughts on this? I'm not sure how much time you've had to digest it, but just how you would feel about what Mr. Larson just said there. I'm going to go try to shut down Mr. Jackson's phone.
Yeah, I mean, if there's hardly any teams in the league, we're not going to have any opposition to playing up in 4A if that's what's necessary.
All right, let's open this up to other members of our committee. I know Mr. Tao is not here. He is fortunate enough to be in Puerto Rico at the moment with his sophomore class at the Meadows. But again, I will tell you where I'm coming from on this. If we start to look at 6, 7, 8, when we look at boys volleyball, if those are going to be 8 teams there, I have zero problem with a 3A with 8 teams. You have a viable league where you can play a double round robin. You get 14 matches out of that. You go into a tournament. To me, this affects only the Southern 3A sports. We don't, if we have similar sport, we have the same sport in the North, that's more teams. We don't have a problem with that. But just in these individual sports here, especially as we look at bowling and flag football, really bowling, and we will get to it as we go through our placements, the top teams in bowling in the 3A, right next to those top teams in bowling in the 4A. Nothing really changes except we've shrunk a championship. They're still very much in the hunt for it. Flag football wise, you look at the success that a Virgin Valley has had over the years, especially Boulder City this year as well. They're going to be right there competitive with it. I want to open this up to the group for other comments, though, as we go forward. Mr. Polzian, I see you've unmuted. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Art, I'd like that. Just this would be this alignment 3 years. If after 3 years there's additional schools get added, we would revisit this in 3 years to see if it's viable to have a 3A.
Yeah, this is, as I put this forward, this is only for this next realignment cycle.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other comments from our group on this one? You will see as we go through, if you've looked at those recommendations that are a little deeper in the packet for bowling and flag football, I have folded those schools into the 4A and just put them in red. Doesn't mean they're going to end up there. Ms. Habig, you see you have your hand up.
So I talked to Tony a little bit, so I think this might be what he was getting ready to maybe say as well. We're both a little hesitant because 4A is just getting too big. And I mean, we're shrinking 5A, which, okay, that's fine. But it seems like, there's one sport, I can't remember which one we counted. We have 36 teams in 4A.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, for lack of a better term, like, oh, just figure it out and put them in 4A. Like everything, okay, if they don't belong somewhere, they just belong in 4A, is kind of how it's feeling. And like you said, some of these teams are going to be very competitive. There's some of these teams that probably should jump up to 5A. I know we can't do that because we can't make them jump up 2 levels, but why can't we open it up and have some of the lower level 4As go down to 3A?
I don't think there's anything restricting us from doing that, with the exception that we've already passed the policy that 3A would be enrollment based only. That right there becomes the issue with that. We look at a 4A, yes, they are going to be larger, but what that also does, sorry, I'm also playing waiter here. What that also does is we've taken those teams, for those of you familiar enough with it, and let's turn the clock back 10 years, 15 years, somewhere in there, where we had basically a 34 team 4A in the South. What we've done, though, is we've tried to get those better teams that we're cleaning up, move them on. And now we have a more competitive top to bottom. Perfectly competitive? No, never gonna be. But a more competitive top to bottom within that, with more options. Before I get to Mr. Larson and Mr. Polzian, I don't want to cut off Ms. Habig for anything else you want to say on this.
No, that's fine. You can go to them, and then if I have anything, I'll raise my hand again.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
Tammy, we did talk about that as an option. We just didn't know how the teams would feel coming down to 3A and just those sports, if there were teams that would want to come down, or having us up, what would be the better option. So as the 4A representative, I'm glad to work with you guys on what you feel is a better option for the 4A. So I'm glad to hear your perspective, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Larson. And the one thing that drove a part of this discussion when we looked at the 3A being enrollment based only, the teams that we were putting with those traditional 3A teams were the least successful among the 4A teams within our measurement. They were going over to the 3A with the philosophy that this was a possibility for them to rebuild their program, yet they were leaps and bounds behind some of those 3A schools, and it really wasn't helping them to shift over, because they were going to the 3A, making the longer trip out to Mesquite, to Overton, and getting mercy ruled in those games in a lot of cases as well. Didn't happen all the time, did happen some of the time. Mr. Polzian.
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't want to turn this meeting completely on its head, but first of all, we keep referring to policies and procedures, but God forbid at some point we make a decision that's just in the best interest of kids and we go back and change something. I don't know how that works. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But for years, the 3A South was 3 teams.
Mhm.
And when this first started 10 years ago or whenever, we all said, hey, if you think going to 3A is the easy route, you're sorely mistaken. And what we've seen happen is we talk about rebuilding programs, and we rebuild them in 4A, they go to 5A, and they go right back to where they were. We keep recirculating the same teams up from 3A into 4A, back down to it's a cycle of 5 to 6 schools that are doing the same thing every year. And I don't want to get back into my own personal thoughts with what I think we should do. I mean, Tammy's right. The 4A is gigantic. I think it was basketball we were
I
talking about.
think it was basketball. Yeah, it was like
36 teams in 4A basketball. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of those schools that can compete. I have concerns with facilities in some of these volleyball situations with these schools. Lower level games, we're messing out. And not to take you away from 3A, because they're missing out on those lower level games too. I understand that. But yeah, I do have concerns with some of those things, but again, facility wise, I'll go back to the policies and procedures. The football plan is so good, and I wish we could just apply it to every team sport, but if we can't, we can't. But that's just my thought. I mean, we got to do what's in the best interest and for competition's sake. And it really, I agree that, a state title played between 4 schools that have played each other all year probably isn't, real viable. But, those are my concerns with my kids, like missing out lower level games. Facility wise, what are these facilities, outside of the rurals? I know that we're good there, but, a lot of these charters and things that don't have facility. Let's be honest, some of these facilities aren't safe to play at, if I'm being honest. So I'll shut up now.
Well, I think the facilities.
Stepping down.
No, appreciate all your comments, Mr. Bowling. The facilities is an entirely different issue, right? The facilities, I don't know that necessarily goes hand in hand with an alignment per se, right? But it's something to look into. It's something to be concerned about, no question. Ms. Habig, you've got your hand back up again. Another comment.
Well, and because we got to meet with everyone last week, obviously with the conference and, playoffs, this isn't just a Tony and a Tammy opinion, just so you guys know. This is very much coming from our constituents, I guess, to say the least. Like, and nobody wants to sound like the person whining. Nobody wants to sound like, oh, it's, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. But that's basically what they're telling us is like, as 4A and 5A, like Tony said, perfect example. Those same teams are getting moved around and around. And like you said, I don't think 3A is where you go to rebuild a program, but I do sometimes think that if we're going to make it, I don't know if fair is the right word, but at some point we may have to look and say, okay, maybe we messed up making 3A enrollment only for this. If they can't, because it's almost like, okay, they're enrollment only when they need to be, but now that it's not convenient, now they want to play with 4A and 5A. And I get it, because I agree, four teams, that's ridiculous for a state championship. But at the same time, trying to add 4 or 5 more teams into 4A for us, that just makes it insanely large. And I know what we used to do, and I understand what we used to do, but I thought the whole point of going to what we did was to get away from what we used to do.
I don't necessarily think the 3A wants to go into the 4A on something like this. And I don't want to speak for Mr. Larson or Mr. Odegaard. They can certainly speak for themselves on this. I think they look at it as I do and go, what are we doing here? This is 4 teams. We can't bowl each other 5 times each during the regular season, then go have an individual and a team tournament against the same 4 schools, same 3 other opponents during the course of the year. Mr. Larson, your hand's up. Instead of me speaking for you, please do.
Yeah, I personally, there was some sports added I didn't want added at Wappa. I was trying to get away from boys volleyball for a lot of years because of the numbers we have. I wanted to keep this traditional sports, but unfortunately it's been good for some of our kids to be able to do that. But I think of the old like bowling and boys volleyball. Boulder City's had boys volleyball and bowling before it was a 3A sport at all, and that was just the old rule, like kind of like what I was talking about with tennis, where if there was a team and their league didn't have that sport, that they had to go up to the next classification. So I was just going off the traditional way it was done before we even had 3A in any of these sports. I really understand Tammy and Tony's concerns. I do, and I just thought that was the easiest option. But I'm willing to look at if it's viable for us to just keep a 3A and we'll just go out and find those games. But like boys volleyball, if that's 8 and the NIAA and Mr. Jackson's saying that's enough for us to have our own state championship that way, we'll definitely work in that direction. But yeah, bowling, I don't know what to do with that one at all. I have no, obviously no team in bowling, so I'm trying to help with Boulder and Meadows and those that do. And flag football, I think is kind of on the. That's a tough one. It could be doable, I guess, if that's what we need to do. I was just offering up options, and I guess I should have talked to Tammy and Tony before this meeting. But on this topic, I kind of just talked with our coaches who were a little hesitant. They're like, oh, I don't know if we want to go up there. I'm like, there's not a lot of choice. There's, what else do we do? So, but if
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry. Now, here's the other part of that equation. If we're going to keep the 3A, let's say we look at bowling, let's say we look at flag football, who goes from the 4A to the 3A to join them? Are we taking the bottom teams again and putting them into a spot where instead of having more teams with which you are competitive in a larger 4A, we now put you into the 3A where you have fewer teams against whom you're competitive, and you still have those teams at the top that are significantly better, let's say. Mr. Polzien, your hand is up again.
How do you raise your hand?
You click on reactions and then hit raise hand on that toolbar on the bottom, Mike. But you have to wait until I'm done now. Just kidding. Hey, so Bart, you're exactly right in the fact that if you move down the bottom teams, it's not competitive in 3A or in 4A. We bring this up every year. Again, my concern is exactly what Tammy said. Is like the 4A is gigantic in a lot of these sports because as we've seen, like from the fall realignments, the 5A has shrunk substantially because there's a pretty big divide, right? As we're seeing between 7, 8, 9, 10 schools and everybody else. And honestly, you look even in some sports in 4A, you move some of these schools up to 4A, they're going to win 4A.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how you fix the problem. And to be fair, when Dallas said that he should have spoke to us, just so you know, Dallas and I speak every day, but sometimes it's not about realignment. I don't necessarily have a problem with them coming up, if I'm being honest, but maybe, for the sake of them wanting to keep the 3A viable, that we do look into maybe then we move some down rather than, having a 50 team for a volleyball league,
And honestly, the one solution to this is one that some people aren't going to like, and that's that there is no protection for anybody, and you divide it out 5, 4, and 3. We're down the rabbit hole on that, though. We've already decided fall in a certain way. To decide winter and spring in a different way likely isn't fair. Mr. Kofer, then Mr. Jackson, then Mr. Larson. I knew this one was going to be a while. Mr. Kofer.
Thanks. 4A, what you did in football is you cut 4A, 5A in half, right?
Pretty much.
You know what we did in football? I mean, I don't think, because it's 4A, 5A. It's not, I mean, you speak of it as it's 4A. Well, it's not 4A. It's 4A, 5A. It's all one big clump of schools. I mean, we're from a charter school perspective, we are the smallest, but none of the charter schools from a straight enrollment standpoint, to my knowledge, would qualify as 4A, 5A without the multiplier. So we you know, from a personal perspective, Slam, I don't want to go to 4A, 5A, and we just don't have the kids, but we got to go, you know, and so that's what we're going to do. But you know, we would love to stay in the 3A. We think it's a great league. We think it's very competitive, and so I don't know if we're coming to the point to where we need to look at changing the enrollment levels to equal out these different classifications. I know that's not a big Bart Davis. I know you're not a big proponent of that because you don't correlate enrollment to success. And true, it doesn't. Sport to sport, it does not correlate. Okay, but as an overall general, you know, playing level template or component, I mean, it has, you know, we still look at it. We still use it. We're enrollment protected with 3A. 3A is enrollment protected, you know, so just kind of throwing some fuel for fire out there, maybe a little too much, but yeah, I just wanted to get my 2 cents in on that. You know, you guys talk about 4A, but it's not just, it's 4A, it's 4A, 5A. Are you just going to continue to take just the elite 8 to 10, you know, to 5A, or are you just at some point say, hey, we got to take the top half and the bottom half? You know, that's going to equal out the numbers if you're looking to do something.
Thank you, Mr. Kofer. The one thing I want to get back to, and I've got 3 people with hands raised, and we're going to get to you in a minute. We talk about what we did for football, and I've heard a couple of comments in this meeting and elsewhere that what we're doing for football is great. We don't know it's great yet. The idea sounds good. We have a year of data that we ran through, and this seems to back up what we're trying. We haven't put it into practice yet. We don't know if it's going to work. Hopefully it does. Hope it does. I don't want stuff that we're throwing out there to not work. But football's a trial run at this point. We don't know that we're going to have the success that we hope we have with it. So we need to kind of be careful there too. Mr. Jackson, you.
Yeah, I don't know. Does that work? Okay. Want me to go in the other room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're going to pick up right back off speaker is what the issue is going to be here.
Thanks, Bart. Couple of things. The discussion that we're having here is not unique to just this situation. We currently do exactly what we're talking about in swimming. We do it in wrestling, and we do it in golf. So we have the situation. The wrestling is 1A, 2A wrestles together. I think we need to look at it from that standpoint too, is this. We have proven time and time again over the last 16 years that taking the lower side of the 4A and moving it into the 3A is unsuccessful. It will not work. We've already proven that numerous times over. Also, they are going to play those teams anyway into the 4A. No matter where you draw the line for the 4A/5A, 4A/3A, whoever's above the line is not happy. Whoever is below the line is happy. In some scenarios, I think what we've got to do is we have to look at this pragmatically and from a different lens than we've ever looked at before. Do we need 3 divisions of flag football? I think that's the first question we need to ask. And if we need 3 divisions, how are we dividing those 3 divisions? Because we cannot live under 2 roofs. We cannot say enrollment number is going to be the only one, and we cannot say competition or competitive balance is going to be the only one, because you cannot pick one and then utilize the other. In other words, let's just use Boulder City. It's a great example. They're first on the list in flag football. Boulder City does, if we are going to use enrollment, is 3A. That's the only method we should use for them at that point. If we're going to use competitive balance, then Boulder City should be placed where it falls competitively. And therefore, it would probably be an upper tier 4A school and not in the 3A. So in order to do what we want to do here is we've got to quit living under 2 roofs. We did that for too long, and we found the fallacy in that. Having 3A protected and then putting in the lower achieving or lower competitive 4A schools by enrollment was not successful. It did not work. No school rebuilt and grew out because they could not. So I think that's most important. The other thing is this: I do not like the idea of a 4-team state championship for a whole division. I don't like a 6-team. I'm not even sold on an 8-team. I think what we need to look at is what is best for the state and the sport that we are talking about. In bowling, I believe that's a very simple answer. We move them into the 2 divisions. They're 4A or 5A, and we use competitive balance from that point. Flag football, I believe the same thing. I think that's the case. Boys volleyball, my concern is this, and X, you're on the line right now. You can probably check how many teams dropped last year. There are teams that dropped their programs. There are some teams on here who said they would have programs and then dropped programs. And I feel that what we get is diminished results again. Those are my 3 cents. I will stop at that point and lower my hand.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. We'll let you back in the room too after that. Mr. Larson, then Mr. Polzian, then Mr. Anthium, then Ms. Haybick. We got a whole lineup here. Mr. Larson.
I think, I guess I agree with Tim. Just bringing down the lower levels, that's not something that I think works. I don't think people want that. I think there might be, I would like to hear, I know I've talked to other schools who would want to stay in 3A and you know, who fits or who feels like that would be a good fit for them. I don't know how we would determine that, but I'd like to know if there's anyone out there that would like to stay in 3A for flag football, if that would be their desire to do so. Just so we could keep the 3A league. But otherwise, we love, I mean, when we have the north-south, like you said, this is never an issue because we have enough teams. We can compete against each other, then compete with the north. It just, these 3 are just a little different. And I would love to keep a 3A, but with the number of teams, we're willing to, I guess, go with what Tim said about just, okay, we'll be part of the 4A, 5A as that happens. And then in 3 years, we'll revisit again.
And quite honestly, there are teams that we could all sit here and identify that it doesn't matter what classification we put that team in, they're just not going to be competitive because they just don't have the athletes at this time. They don't have the skill level at this time, whatever the case may be. They're just not, they're going to struggle to be competitive wherever we put them. To put them in a spot just so that we could have a 3rd classification, I don't know if that's the right answer either. Mr. Polzin, then Mr. Anthium, then Ms. Haybick. Mr. Polzin, if you'd unmute, please, sir.
Love you, Coach, but I'm going to disagree here on the 4A, 5A thing. With 4A, 5A football, we have a mechanism for that to play out at the end with the way the playoff structure is now set up. Yes, we play each other, but at the end of the year, we're going to wind up in common competitive opponents at the end. My thought here with this, and Bart, I'm sure you would agree, every one of those 3A flag football teams would be either probably 4A. So maybe the 3A becomes the bottom 10 4A flag football teams and you move these guys up into 4A. Now that blows population protection all to hell. I get that. But if we're talking competitive balance, now the issue there is then you have a state championship that, let's be honest, is probably not viable. No offense to anyone, but that probably wouldn't be a state champion anywhere else. But why would that not be an option? Okay, those are all probably, I mean, Virgin Valley's won state, 4 years in a row? Maybe they go 5A based on where their rubric numbers go. Are we willing to go just straight numbers here and put them where they fall? And then make the 3A everybody else that happens to fall in the 3A? And I'm done.
You realize that I'm not playing poker today based on the fact that it was real difficult for me to hide that grin as you were talking, Mr. Polzin, when you said I agree with some of this. You've read the playbook that I put away for this cycle and put into 28-30 in my mind. Mr. Anthium, then Ms. Haybick.
Thanks, Bart. I was hoping you can actually scroll down. I know we've been stuck on this page right here, but for everybody's visual, maybe going to 33 or 35, just because we're talking about bowling and we're talking about flag football. If you go one more, just kind of show the alignment that we're kind of looking at. So right there, if you could stop right there, I think this is telling when you look at this page. The right now, the way things are kind of would potentially be set up, right? So you'd have 8 teams in the 5A, and then as everybody's kind of stated, your 4A's gotten a little bit bigger. Now, are we going to concern ourselves with 4 additional teams? Obviously, that's going to increase the size of potential divisions. I mean, you can thin out the divisions. I mean, we've seen Bart get very creative. I believe it's volleyball that we have 5 leagues. So just want to kind of give you a standpoint on that. And then, Bart, if you can just kind of scroll down to page 35. Again, we've got numbers. If we hold things as is shown here and we divide the leagues up in 4 ways, those flag football leagues are going to be locked. They're going to play 18 games, and it's going to be all conference games. There's not going to be non-conference games. Again, we can thin that out. We can make maybe a 5th division in that league. But I just want people to understand that concept and what have you. And who's to say that we might have some schools that might want to petition potentially in not only in flag football but also in bowling. And last but not least, I just want to get back to Tim's point. I know that right now, as we've seen that 3A for boys volleyball, we have 8 teams. I can tell you that one of those 8 teams dropped out, and then 4 days later said, "Oh wait, never mind. I'm going to come back in." And we do have 2 other additional schools that are new, into the realm of the NIAA. So I know they're building programs. So again, just a consultant sharing my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Anthium. And I don't want anybody to get tripped up either on any of the recommendations that you see here. First of all, recommended. That's the key word on all of these, even if it's not spelled correctly on that page. I don't know who did that. But it is just a recommendation. These are not leagues that we're locking anybody into. We can divide those up further. We can shrink them. There's all sorts of options when we get to that point. Ms. Habig, you've been waiting patiently in this line of hand raising. Please, Ms. Habig.
It's fine. I'm patient. So I think kind of to echo what I think it was Tim that said, like, you can't live under both roofs. And we've been saying that. I've been saying that for years. You can't have enrollment protection and competitive balance because they don't exist. But we chose to go enrollment protection.
Mhm.
So if that's the case, then we deal with either we go with enrollment protection or we don't. But I mean, I could live because I was going to bring up what X brought up, that these leagues are getting so big, we don't get to play, we don't get non-conference games. It's like we get to just play who we're assigned to, and we don't get any leeway. But I'd be willing to say, okay, you know what? We'll take them up to 4A, 5A, but they got to fall where they fall on the rubric. So if some of them fall in 5A, then they got to play in 5A. And I would be fine with it. I don't love it, but it's one of those where I also don't love for kids that you have a 4-team league or a 5-team league. But, if they're willing to say, okay, perfect example, Virgin Valley, you're going to fall in the 5A for flag football. Come on up and play 5A. I'd be okay with it.
And I'm not disagreeing, Mr. Larson. I know you get your hand up. We've also got something in there that says we can't force anybody to go from 3A to 5A. So now this would then turn around and counter that as well. And I mean, first of all, whatever we decide here, right? All of it still has to go forward to the Board of Control to approve.
Mhm.
Will the board approve that? I don't know. I'd love to be in the game of prediction and be able to get stuff right. I like to just get stuff right. Mr. Larson, please.
Yeah, I haven't got to talk to. I've been trying to text a few people just to get some thoughts now that this has opened up. But I think overall, some of the people I have been able to talk to, we are open to go. If we have the 5A, 4A, 3A, still keep the 3A, but make it all about rubric points at that point. So like Tony said, the very bottom are 3A, and then you have the 4A and then the 5A. I know there's people in the 3A that I've been able to talk with that are, for these sports that are Southern only, where there's no Northern opponent, us have to, we'll play by the rules of that league. But I do feel like at the same time, to start with, going from 3A to 4A would be the max at this alignment, and then at the next one, if they're then have the points to go 5A from there, then we play by those rules. But I do think that rule saying, hey, you can only go from 3A to 4A to start with, would be what these schools would want to start with.
Point of clarification before we go any further, as we look at that girls flag football, that is, if we include those 3A teams, what that is that's 36 teams. If that gets divided into 4 leagues, that's 4 leagues of 9. You would have 16 league games. You would still have 2 outside. If you play the double round robin, you don't have to play the double round robin. There's all sorts of ways to get around league type schedules. And I'm a huge proponent of, if you have 18 games to play, I'd love to see you play 18 different opponents. It's a better measurement across the board. Plus, if you're gonna end up playing some of these teams in the playoffs anyways, you don't want to see them 3 and 4 times in the same season. Mr. Jackson, I'm going to bring you back into this. You've heard some of this. I'm going to try to turn it a little bit so we can get you in picture as well, and just kind of get some of your thoughts.
I believe 2 divisions in these sports is where we should end. I firmly believe that. I do not think we can adequately divide it out into 3 in a manner that is befitting what we have in our state. I will tell you what Mr. Kofer proposed about dividing it in half is a viable option as well. However, I will tell you, the minute you divide it, whoever just went above that line will be appealing, and whoever is below the line will be appealing, because I guarantee you that right now someone is looking at that line where we have put it as a recommendation, and they're already preparing their appeal. I think the fact that the league has the flexibility to get the games that they need, whether it's a double round robin or if it's a single game, whatever the case may be, their flexibility there, I don't think the scheduling is an issue. I like what Dallas said, that after this alignment, we then would have a good basis for looking at this and saying flag football, bowling, or boys volleyball could be strictly a rubric-based alignment, because no one would be moved up to. I think that we need to get to this point, because I think it also helps us with other sports as we look at those. You talk to your wrestling coaches, they will tell you there's many of them that are all in for a 1 division, 1 state champion in every weight class, winner take all, as well as, condensing it and refining that sport as well. So I think we have the opportunity here to do what's right. If the North were to ever come into flag football, I think we would have to readdress at that point, as well as bowling and boys volleyball. Because like Dal said, we would be able to have the North-South state championship that we've built strongly in other sports. So from that standpoint, I'm very comfortable with a 5A, 4A. I'm very comfortable with an enlarged 4A, because I think competitively, to move it to a 5A, 4A, 3A, we would be in a situation where we would be putting schools that are not successful against schools that are highly successful, or even worse, we would have schools that are not successful that are going to play other schools that are unsuccessful, and we would see dropping of programs. I think there's an opportunity here to provide opportunity for our kids. So with that, I'll shut up.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. We started talking about scheduling, and Mr. Anthium's hand shot up. Mr. Anthium, please, sir.
Yeah, no, Bart, I just wanted to see specifically, I'm just, you've got the flag football page up right now. Can you talk to the group about how you set these leagues? I see that you've taken 1 3A team or 2 in this instance with Boulder City and Democracy Prep. Just can you talk about how you set that up?
I can. And first of all, these aren't leagues. These are just what this is right now is it's just these are all the teams in 4A. If you look at the teams that are in the regular black colored type, those are serpentine across the board. Simply serpentine as we go following the snake. The teams in red just filled in blank slots for now, because we have not divided these into leagues. I'm not telling you that Virgin Valley is going to be in a league with Sky Point and Doral Red Rock, and as I move windows so I can see this, and Legacy and Sloan Canyon, and call it the All Over the Valley League. we're not set up for that. This is simply, these are the teams that are going into this classification. Once we lock that down, then I think we can do what we did for the fall with our 4A and in some cases 5A. We take that serpentine method and marry that with a little bit of the geography where we can make some trades in there to keep the balance of the leagues equal. Sorry, Slam, forgot the A on the end of Nevada on that one too. Wow, this page struggled. But also we can kind of clean that up a little bit. Again, wherever we go, probably not a wise idea to separate those two teams anyways, Moap and Virgin. If we had a Tiddlywinks league, they'd want to play each other in it, simply because they're that good of rivals, and it just makes sense. So there's not a lot there to how these were put together. Let's just start with who's in the classification, and then we'll go from there. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I just want to say, like I said, I'm talking with some people. I feel like we are asking to move into the league, so we will play by that league. We're not gonna, hey, we have to do this. If it's super serpentine based, that's the way it is, then we're entering that league. So we will play it, how that league works things out. We won't try to enforce the 3A's will on how it's done in the 4A, if that's the case. So everyone I've talked to felt the same. They're willing to be in the 5A, 4A, go into the 4A for 3 years and then rubric based and go from there from years forward. Unless, like I said, we get enough to actually have a northern-southern rivalry in the league or something like that. That's just kind of the feel I'm getting from the 3As that have contacted me.
Thank you. At the end of the day, I hope we are looking at only 2 sports here. I hope we are looking at only bowling and flag football. If all 8 of those boys volleyball programs stick, again, I know some people don't really like the idea of an 8-team classification, but the difference between 8 and 9 to me is negligible. We can play with that. I'm all right with that. 4 and 5, that gets a little bit dicier when they're the only teams you're gonna see. That playbook for 28 through 30 is really being read. I'm excited about that. But I think right here, right now, what we've got are 2 options. And if somebody wants to throw a third out there, please do. I think we look at a situation right now where either we are going to randomly pick some schools, not quite sure how, and send them some 4A schools and send them over to the 3A so that we can complete a 3A that is viable enough to have a regular season and a postseason. Or we look at folding these 3A teams into the 4A for this cycle. Not sure who was first. Let's go Mr. Kofer, then Mr. Pilsen.
Okay, so to just, hey, throwing something out there, but Tim mentioned, hey, you can't live under 2 roofs. What if we work it the other way, where you take you've broken out the 5A based on the top, the where the break is or whatever, the top, what do you got there? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10
For flag 10, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got 10. Well, what if you just roll you roll the 3A teams, into the 4A, and then you take the rubric of those teams and break those in half, and you put the lower half into a 3A classification and the middle group into the 4A classification.
It's a possibility. I think at that point, we're creating the 3rd championship again, so that we have the 3rd championship again becomes a little bit of a question to me on that.
Well, then how do we not put the 3A?
But you're also creating a 3rd level of competition, because right now, I mean, if you're saying, well, there's too many teams in 4A was what I hear Tammy saying, and maybe even Tony.
Well, and here's what I'm going to say.
Classification. I don't know.
Mike, if we break them into, if we do what you just said, 5A goes where 5A is, then take the 4A and divide it into 4A, 3A. What we've done is we've taken the 3A out of the 3A and recreated a 3A and telling the 3A, you can't play in the 3A. So
no. Let me. You've created a 3A that is based on success factor, which is what
we have an enrollment.
And is what the 4A wants.
But a 3A that supersedes it. And I don't think adding 4 teams or 5 teams to the 4A is going to throw them into a complete disarray. I just think that what I don't want to do is gerrymander
a 3A, just so we have a 3A division.
I agree 100%. I was just throwing something out there to see if it would have an appetite with the people who are saying there's too many teams in 4A.
No, and I appreciate that, Mr. Kofer. I really do. But then my question becomes, okay, so we're going to do that for bowling and for flag football, which are the two sports that we are terribly thin on 3A teams. Why wouldn't we then do that for every other sport? And then would we have to retroactively do that for the fall sports that we've already passed? So there's lots of cans of worms here that we are tap dancing on the lids of. Let's put it that way. Mr. Larson, please.
I really would be interested because I know I have a good relationship with some of these teams that have been in 3A before, mainly some charters like Sky Point, Kofrit Slam. I know Cadence. They've all, I think a lot of them have wanted to stay in the 3A. Just we chose to, but they're double enrollment, whatever they left. I'd be curious to ask if those schools in these sports would like to stay in the 3A where they were before. But I don't know if there's a time or a chance to even do that at this point. Is there, Bart?
I mean, I think we could do that and bring that back we could table the flag football and the bowling till next week, if that gave what you thought was enough time, and do those placements then, but we'd have to have everybody ready to appeal at that point. If they didn't like where they were going, they would need to be able to do that at that meeting.
I just
Jackson's got his head in his hands on this one, so
my relationships with a lot of them, and then and how we've worked in certain sports in the past, and I just, I'd just be curious if that would be something they'd want to do if the 4A does not want the 3A and we have to find more teams. I'd be willing to reach out to some of these other schools that were 3A and ask, hey, for these sports, do you want to stay in the 3A?
Let me give you Mr. Jackson once
And
again.
Dallas, what are we going to do with the school that the 3A says we don't want in the 3A, and they appeal? How do we deny that? Now we're becoming selective. I think that we can't do that. I would not support that, because if the wrong school appeals and the 3A says, oh, you know what, we don't like this, we don't like that, we don't want that, we're going to deny that on that basis, I think that opens us up to some serious issues that we need to address down the line. I think if we're going to have a 3A, the 3A has to be based on policy and procedure, based on past practice, and not arbitrarily, hey, we liked you in the 3A, come on back. Because then it becomes, I hate to say it, elitist without being elitist, if you get what I'm trying to say. That it would become a popularity contest, for lack of better terms.
Selective,
that's the better word.
I mean, I completely understand that. That's kind of been the Pahrump thing with when they've been a little over the number, but they've been a good fit for years. We've kind of used that as hey, they're a traditional 3A school, even if they've gone over a little bit of the number. That was more of what my thought was, but I agree. I was just an option.
Mr. Polzien.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say we don't know if the football plan worked. Let's be honest, the plan before we threw out after one cycle anyway, so we really don't know if that plan worked either.
Correct.
So we can put that one to bed. We don't know if anything works because we just throw it out and start something new. I personally have no problem with the way this looks. I do know, like with principals, they do like with the football plan with the serpentine and the geographically based things. From a former 3A guy, boy, that's getting rid of a lot of tradition right there. I mean, we're eliminating a complete classification that means a lot to those communities. But I will say, and I think maybe to Tim's point, we don't need to have a 3A if it's not a viable state championship. Let's just be honest. We're all coaches and athletes. We don't want a state championship that we can all look at and go, boy, that's really not a state championship caliber football game or whatever. So, I mean, that's just my concerns. I have no problem with these guys moving up. They're all great. They have all three levels. Everything would be cool. Scheduling would be easy. I just would hope that they would keep those principal considerations in mind too when it comes to travel and those types of things.
Well, and Mr. Polzien, that's something that, again, we've kind of allowed leagues and league presidents flexibility in terms of number of leagues, the dividing up in that. And that's something that in the fall, Mr. Anthiam, I don't know if you want to chime in on this again, but you and I both, first of all, sat together up here when we're talking about football after the board meeting back in January. And then we also talked on the phone about, okay, what can we do here? And came up with different ideas, bounced them back and forth to try to tighten up some of the geography issues while not getting rid of the balance issue in the process. Mr. Anthem, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that or not.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Bart. And to Tony's point, that's been the big ask from most of our Southern principals is that we want to get a little bit closer to geography. And I think that, Bart, we've been able to kind of manipulate a little bit that where the leagues are still effective and we're still pretty well set geographically. It's not always going to be perfect. You're still going to have a couple of outliers here and there, but overall, I think it's a positive thing. And, like you said, here's what we're just looking at for classifications, 4A, 5A. But when it starts time making leagues, maybe we have a fifth league to allow for some non-conference games. Like I said, you've been very creative in finding names for additional leagues, sun, sky, lake, desert, all that fun stuff.
I'm running out of elements though. I mean, look, if we look at what is right now just on the screen, a 36 team 4A, that could be 6 leagues of 6 each. And you've got the freedom in there. And then it's just a matter of how you set up your postseason. And we're not to that yet. We'll get there. Ms. Habig, you've got your hand up.
So I'm listening to a lot and trying to, not just go off of my feelings, obviously, because I'm not just representing Legacy High School. I'm trying to represent all of 4A and 5A. And I think the thing that keeps sticking out is the decision we make this time isn't just 2 years, it's 3 years. And I think some of these kids that are going to come in as freshmen, this is going to be all they know. You know what I mean? And so I think that maybe that's why this go round, everyone's a little bit more, I don't know. It's almost like you can suck it up for 2 years, but then for that third year, adding that third year in makes things a little bit more difficult, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. I don't know. And I don't disagree. Like, I don't know. I just keep going back to what Tony keeps saying. And I know that it's not what everyone wants to hear, but team sports are just so much different than individualized sports. And I just keep going back to we're going to give somebody a 3-year sentence or a 3-year whatever. I don't want to say sentence, but 3-year, you're going to be stuck here for 3 years on past success from other teams. And it doesn't matter what sport we're talking about, right? But then, you bring in the enrollment protection, but we're saying, okay, get rid of it for this. So it feels like we're kind of, I don't know, all over. And I don't know that, and we say this every meeting, we're not going to make everyone happy. We know that. But I don't know. It is something, I just don't understand why we can't look at what we're doing for football for every team sport. Because that fixes our 3A, 4A, 5A problem.
No, actually it doesn't, because 3A football was not a part of the 4A, 5A solution for football. It was enrollment based only.
It was.
So that if we're going to go that way, we can't say this will solve this problem, because we would still end up with the same small number of group of schools in the 3A, in these these team sports that only are played in the South. So that while it sounds like we could do that, it would still not resolve what we have here. All it would do is take the teams that are in red off your sheet and divide the 5A, 4A in half. That's what it would do. That's the only change there. It would not resolve the 3A problem, because if we follow the football solution, 3A is strictly enrollment based only. So that right there would be the issue. As far as a 3-year term, we've done 4 years, we've done 2 years. And I can tell you, for every person who says, oh, we shouldn't go 3 years, it's too long, I can get you 50 people who say 2 years is too long, because my seniors and my juniors are the only ones that play varsity, and they're the ones that have to suffer through this. But I don't think that the duration here is the issue. I think what we're really getting down to is this is different. And this is a change. And none of us like it when we have to be the voice that makes the change. I can't make a motion, or I would have made a motion 25 minutes ago and we'd have had a vote. But nobody wants, and it's not a fault of anyone. It's a change. And this committee has been beaten up by football. You guys have been beaten up by football. You second guess yourselves, but you're a very wise group of people. That's why you're on this committee. I trust your judgment. And I think if you make a motion, I think that it will be either passed or rejected. But whatever comes out of this, I think you guys are on the right path. I think you know where you want to go. I just think I get it. We're gun shy. I jokingly have a medal hanging on my door that was an old state championship medal that nobody claimed. And I put on there Realignment Committee Survivor, because that's what you've become. You're survivors. You're in survivor mode right now. And I get it. So I appreciate all this. Turn me off, Bart. Here we go.
Turn you off. If it were only that easy. Mr. Polsey and then Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we allow these schools up into the 4A classification of flag football, and essentially eliminating the 3A classification. Do we want to do it for flag football and bowling?
That's up to you. You're the one making the motion.
Let's do it for both flag football and bowling. Allow these 3A schools to move up into the 4A classification for this next realignment cycle.
Okay, Mr. Larson, I know you've got your hand up, but I need a second on this one first from Mr. Polsey. Motion, let me rephrase this just to make sure I'm good on this, Mr. Polsey. Your motion is for this cycle to move these schools that are in the 3A into the 4A for the alignment purposes in bowling and flag football. Is that correct?
Those are the only two sports we're discussing, correct?
Correct. Volleyball's at 8 right now. I don't know if we want to touch volleyball.
Yeah, volleyball's in a little bit more viable situation, I think. So I would just like to address these two sports currently with this motion.
Okay. Do we have a second to Mr. Polsey's motion?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion or any questions on this?
And this is I just want to say we love our 3A. We love the way we do things. We love the tradition of 3A. When it comes to the north-south, I have coaches that were worried about moving, into the 4A in flag football or in whatever sport, because they didn't want this to be the thing that opened up the door for all of our sports. So we are very aware of this, the newness of this. I just want to, we do love the way we do things in 3A, the tradition, the people that we come, everything about it, but we're willing to do this in this sport if that's what we need to do to have that sport.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Any other comments or any other further discussion on this? Okay, we have a motion on the table from Mr. Polsey and a second from Mr. Larson, that in the sports of bowling and flag football for this realignment cycle, we will take those teams that would be classified by enrollment as 3A and fold them into the 4A. Again, just for bowling and girls flag football. That motion by Mr. Polsey and that second by Mr. Larson. All those in favor, please indicate by saying
aye.
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 any opposed. Motion passes.
I would like to say, sorry, guys in the north.
This had borderline possible effects on them. So yeah, I'm sorry to a lot of people on that. Okay. Let me ask real quick before we get into placements, do you guys need a break real quick, or do we want to go ahead and press forward?
I think it's my part.
Press forward. Press forward, you shall. Okay, let's go to item number 9. And these are the winter season sport by sport placements for 5A, 4A, 3A for the fall 2025 through spring 2028 alignment cycle. Again, keep in mind 1A, 2A. We've decided that already, thankfully, with a couple of exceptions coming down the road. Let's go to boys basketball first, and let's go to page 26 in our packets. And what you see here is the South boys basketball rubric for these last 2 years. We have current classification for those teams. We have where they are eligible to be placed. Again, there is no north-based rubric here. The north is divided up with those 3A schools being in the 3A size schools. Where the north's going to go 4A or 5A, that's the next page. We'll get to it. But this factors into what the recommendation will be. And as you start to go down this list, well, heck, there's a very clear top 2, but after that discussion, we're not going to have 2 teams in a championship. We'll show where we drew the line here in a minute. Those of you in the packet have gone ahead and cheated anyways. Matter East, Democracy Prep, both coming out of 3A, can't automatically go to 5A. We can't automatically place them there. One of those teams is here to appeal to go to 5A anyways, and we will get to that in a moment. On page 27, that is the comparison between the North and the South large school teams and how they have fared over the course of these 2 years. Not a whole lot of data here, but if you look at it, the North has had 3 games against the 5A South, lost them all. The North against the 4A South, real close to 500, 8-9, 2-3 at state. Sierra Vista obviously winning those 2 championships in back-to-back years as a Southern 4A school. Part of the reason why. In fact, they handed the South all 3, or handed the North rather, all 3 losses in state championships. As we look at the recommended, I'm going to learn to spell that word correctly yet, I guarantee it. Recommended alignment for our basketballs. Here is where I came up with. I have the North playing 4A after we just saw the success or lack thereof against the 5A. I have an 8-team Class 5A in boys basketball. Some of you may wonder with one of these schools here why they rubric points were as high as they were. We know that team had to forfeit some games this year. We have decided as a group, and this was a board decision years and years ago, that if a team had to forfeit a large chunk of its season, those results would be played out as though they weren't forfeited. So it wouldn't skew the entire rubric. We do not have leagues listed here. Again, these, when you get to the 5A, if we end up with 8 teams, I'm certain that's going to be one league. The Southern region, the Northern region, these are not divided into leagues yet. We will work with the league presidents with that. What you see in the North, they do not have a rubric that's strictly alphabetical. What you see in the South, that is by serpentine method in the 4A, alphabetical in the 3A. Okay, that's a lot of information thrown at you all at once. Questions and discussions here on boys basketball about where we drew the line, about how anybody got placed, any of that. We'll open it up right now. Mr. Gibson, I can't have you in yet. Your appeal will come later. Yeah, we'll get to it.
Bart, that was going to be my question. Do we need to hear that appeal? Because that obviously would affect the 5A. And it would, would that just move one in, or would we move one out in lieu of?
There are 2 appeals that are going to be heard in boys basketball today. They are from Democracy Prep and GV Christian, Green Valley Christian. Democracy Prep is appealing to go from the 3A to the 5A. GV Christian is appealing for boys basketball to come out of the 2A and join the 3A. If both appeals were to be accepted, GV Christian would take Democracy's place. Democracy would become the 9th team in the 5A. If both were denied, they would stay as they are right now. One doesn't have to relate to the other. They can, they don't have to. They are separate appeals by separate schools. Ms. Habig, your hand is up. Need to unmute. Ms. Habig, you need to unmute.
Did that work?
That does.
Okay, because I pushed it twice and it didn't work, so I don't know what's going on. Mine's more of a question. I think it's like a procedural question that maybe I just missed.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at where they're classed and then where they're eligible, why are certain teams 3A and then 4A eligible and other teams are not?
Size of the school.
Let's go back to it. When and where are we?
So specifically like Mater, Slam, Sloan, Eldorado, like why are the I know why Eldorado.
Yeah,
but...
Sloan should be listed strictly as 4A. They are coming from 3A where they were at right now. We can't force them to 5A. Our policies and procedures say we can't take a team from 3 to 5 without their consent.
No, I knew that, but I mean, why are they 4A eligible, but some other schools are not?
Because of the enrollment numbers. Sloan Canyon goes to a 4A enrollment for this year. Moapa, for instance, still locked into that 3A enrollment.
Gotcha. Okay, that is what I missed. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No worries on that. Ms. Formaster, by the way, Ms. Wonder is also joining the meeting just for, again, the sake of bookkeeping purposes. Anybody who's in the room, again, from Democracy, that item comes up next. That's number 10. I can't have you involved in this item yet. Any other questions from members of our committee? I'm gonna go back to, if I can find it in my own packet. This is what I am recommending. I've talked it over with Mr. Jackson. I want to speak for you since you're 2 seats away from me. I believe you were good with this. He's nodding his head. You may or may not be able to hear it rattle, but this is what we are putting forward for recommending for boys basketball, pending any appeals that may be coming to us, whether those are today based on enrollment or next week based on where a team was placed, 4A or 5A. If we have no further discussion and no other questions, we would entertain a motion to potentially accept this recommendation. If not, then we're going to have to figure out something else.
Motion, this is Art Anderson, 4A, 5A North. Motion to accept the recommendation for boys basketball. I'm sorry, 5A, 4A, and 3A boys basketball.
Thank you, Mr. Art Anderson. Do we have a second?
Bill Sanchez, I will second the motion to, I forgot what he just said, approve the suggested placement for 4A, 5A, 3A boys basketball.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. We have a motion from Mr. Art Anderson, a second from Ms. Sanchez to accept the recommendation presented by the NIAA for the sport of boys basketball. Any further discussion or any questions?
Portion of our state bowling, especially in the bowling coordinators.
All in favor, please say aye.
I try to be out there.
Aye.
Any opposed?
The opportunity to coach kids, so I try to be out there to help them out.
Thank you.
Portion of
Yeah,
that.
you could have everybody again. If there's any background noise, please mute so that that's not
Yeah.
coming back out unless we are,
I think that's you, Bart.
it's actually not me. Nice try.
Mr. Baldwin,
It was a nice try, Miss Habig, but it wasn't me.
Well, it sounded like Tim. That's why I thought it was you.
We'd have had him in line long ago. Let's move on to sub item B, which is girls basketball, and that begins on page 29. And we can see, again, there is a very, very clear top 3 here, which then we have a bit of a gap, shall we say, between 3 and 4, and how those numbers play out. Legacy. Ms. Habig, you're in the room. Congratulations. Girls basketball title, first one that the school has won. Congratulations to Coach Richardson, who's been there the entire darn time that school has been open. I know she was excited as a former UNLV player to win it at UNLV too.
She definitely was.
Hopefully there was some good celebrations over the weekend for that. Again, you see all 48 teams there in the South that were scored in the rubric. Some of those, again, are the 3A enrollment-based schools. As we look at our comparison between North and South, there's not much. There just weren't that many games played between the Northern and Southern large schools over the course of those last 2 years. Just 3 of them played between the North and the 5A South. 6 of them played between the North and the 4A South. 4 of those 6 played in the state tournament. Legacy winning that state tournament this year. We saw what happened a year ago where Minogue and Spanish Springs just steamrolled in those semifinals, and this year it wasn't the same thing. The level of play, perhaps, maybe a little bit of a change, and that's what led me to, in my recommendation, actually keeping, and I didn't think I was going to do this until we got to state this year, keeping the North 4A in girls basketball, going to an 8-team girls basketball classification. Again, pending one more school that is going to appeal here later this morning. This doesn't really look a whole lot different here across the board than what that boys basketball recommendation looked like, just change a few team names. But that's what we've got. And again, those leagues, they're not divided into leagues yet in the southern region. We can certainly do that a little bit differently. But questions, comments, discussion here. If there isn't, we would entertain a motion to approve or any other motion for somebody that would have some sort of different idea on how we do this one.
Two things, Bart. I'd like to go along with you and congratulate Legacy High School and Tammy and her basketball coach on a state championship. And then second, I'd like to make a proposal to approve the recommendation for girls basketball 5A, 4A, and 3A.
A motion from Mr. Art Anderson from Spanish Springs to go along with the recommendation. Do we have a second on this?
Darvel Bell, 4A, 5A, North. I second.
Motion for Mr. Art Anderson, a second for Mr. Darvel Bell to approve the recommendation as presented on page, what is this? Page 31 of our packet. Any further questions, any discussion? Mr. Kofer, you've got your hand up.
So Democracy Prep has to reappeal to go back to 5A?
Correct. They are a 3A school based on enrollment. You can't force them into the 5A. They are going to do that later this morning.
I figured that would have been a no-brainer.
Yeah, me too.
It most likely will be, but we have to go through we have to follow the letter of everything. Any other questions, any discussion? Okay, we will send this to a vote. We have a motion on the table for Mr. Anderson, Art Anderson. We have a second for Mr. Bell to approve the recommendations sent forward here on page 31 of our packet. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Facial gestures do not count, needs to be a verbal vote. Any opposed?
I know.
Motion passes, thank you. Let's move on, page 32. One of those sports that we've spent an hour talking about already is bowling, and I do know there's most likely an appeal coming here. I will tell you that this got set at 8 again, and the reason it got set at 8 is when we look at our bowling score, and our bowling score, you see total difference. What this is a differentiation from the average score during the course of the regular season. The average team score is used. If in the case of Palo Verde, they have a score of 846 in boys, 1080 in girls, that's how many pins above the average they were. And that's why they are at the number 1 slot. Line got drawn where it did because everybody above the number 8 and 9 had at least one team be in the 700s. Liberty did not. They were the number 9. Teams below them did not. They tended to struggle a little bit more. I have heard from Liberty's coach that they do intend to appeal next week. That's not official. I haven't heard anything from the school. That gets us to a recommendation that we've already seen, where we have 8 teams in the 5A. We have folded those schools that are 3A into the 4A. And if we go back up to the rubric and look where 2 of them fell, the Meadows and Boulder City, they're right into that top, what would be 5 among those 4A schools. Any questions, any comments about the alignment as presented on page 33 for bowling? If not, we would entertain a motion to approve.
Jason Odegaard, 3A South. I make motion to approve the recommendation for 5A, 4A bowling.
Thank you, Mr. Odegaard. Do we have a second?
Tammy Habig South, I'll 4A5A South, I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table for Mr. Odegaard, a second from Ms. Habig to approve the recommendation as presented on page 33 for the sport of bowling, which again, as a reminder, is combined boys and girls for alignment purposes. Any other questions or any further discussion? Moving forward to a vote, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We move on to flag football on page 34. And this one again got a little bit tricky. We ended up going 10 deep here, which is actually number 11. That's taking basic into the equation. Basic was pretty balanced between the 2 years. That number was real close to the same. Doesn't happen all the time. The next team that was eligible for 5A on this list was Las Vegas High, and they experienced a bit of a decline this year, as did Bonanza right behind them. So we have a 10-team 5A proposal for girls flag football. We have a 36-team 4A for girls flag football as proposed. Any questions, any further comment here? If not, we will entertain a motion to approve the recommendation for flag football.
Tammy Habig, 4A5A South, make a motion that we accept the proposal for girls flag football for 4A5A.
Thank you, Ms. Habig. Do we have a second?
Bill Sanchez, 4A5A South, I second the placement for girls flag football, the recommendation for girls flag football 4A5A.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Motion on the table from Ms. Habig, a second from Ms. Sanchez to approve the recommendation that is listed on page 35 of our packet today for 5A and 4A girls flag football. Any further discussion or any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We have a flag football alignment to take forward to the board. Skiing is a little bit easier than the rest of this because thankfully Bart doesn't have to keep a rubric for skiing. They just divide out into basically where they're located for Northern Nevada Ski Racing League and the Tahoe Basin Ski League. And I do hope I've gotten everybody here. We do just have the 5A for skiing, and you can see schools like Whittle, Sierra Lutheran, Virginia City, Sage Ridge in this list. Obviously, all smaller schools, they're not 5A sized, but they have skied in these leagues in the past or are adding a team and match up there. That was a weird sound. Any questions here on skiing? South's probably just happy they don't have to look at the Let's open it up for a motion then to approve our recommendation for skiing.
Bart Anderson, 5A, 4A North. I make a motion to approve the recommendation for 5A skiing.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzing, 4A5A South. I will make a second to that motion to approve the skiing alignment.
Didn't know you were a skiing fan, Mr. Polzing. I'm excited about your second. Any
It's quality. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Ski Lee is the best.
Right, there you go. Motion on the table for Mr. Art Anderson, a second for Mr. Polzing to accept the skiing alignment as proposed on page 36. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We move on to our final one, which is wrestling. And we do this one a little bit differently in that we take the top two from the 5A, move them down. The 4A goes in, top two to replace those. We don't anymore take the bottom two 4A teams down to the 3A. And in fact, we do take these 4A schools out of 3A and fold them back up. Before we get to what that looks like, here's the comparison between the North and the South when it comes to wrestling over the course of the last 2 years. This is on page 38 of your packet. The runaway train that is Slam has won the last 2 state titles. Congratulations, Mr. Kofer, on those. Won them convincingly. Spanish Springs and McQueen have finished second and third both years in that. You also see where where those northern finishers by place have come. 2 years ago, they had 9 northern athletes in the state championship matches. This year they had 8. So they are being competitive in the 5A there, which leads me to the recommendation for alignment that you see on page number 39. There would be 12 teams in the northern region, 12 in the southern region, in the 5A. That would keep a certain coach happy. We have 22 teams in the 4A. The 3A, again, is based on enrollment only. Any questions, comments here when it comes to wrestling? If not, we would entertain a motion again to approve the recommendation that is listed before you on page 39.
Bart, I do have a question.
Mr. Odegaard.
In the 3A, it shows a Kipo. Are they adding wrestling to their?
Based on what they submitted to us on their questionnaire back in November for the sports they intend to have, the Kipo was listed as having wrestling. Which is why
Thank you.
put it in here.
Shouldn't we just put slam in the 5A and everybody else in the 4A?
Or slamming about the 8A as good as they've been the last few years, yes.
I second that recommendation.
I'm waiting to see Mr. Kofer's hand go shooting up on this one. Yeah, they've been good. At least this
They're
time.
wrestling each other in the finals anyway.
Well, there is
Slam
some.
A and Slam B is the 5A wrestling.
Oh, thankfully I can only see 6 of you on my screen right now, so I can't really see how some people are reacting to this. That's probably a benefit. Again, as we look at this, page 39, that recommendation is in front of you from us, staying with just a 5A, 4A, and 3A, and more teams than 1 in the 5A. We would entertain a motion to approve the recommendation.
I'll do it. Tammy Habig, 4A, 5A South. I make a motion to accept the alignment for 3A, 4A, and 5A wrestling.
Thank you, Ms. Habig. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzine, 4A, 5A South. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Polzine. Motion on the floor from Ms. Habig, a second from Mr. Polzine to approve the wrestling recommendation listed on page 39. Any further questions, any comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We are through with the placement part of it. And we do have, as I mentioned, 3 appeals that we will hear here today. These are all schools that are based on enrollment, appealing to go to a higher classification. I'm going to bring in Mr. Gibson. I know Ms. Blake is also here from Democracy Prep. We'll hear those 2 first, and we don't have to hear these together. They are appealing for both their boys and girls basketball programs to move up from the 3A to the 5A. We will take separate votes on these because, again, one is not tied to the other. But Mr. Gibson, I'd like to go ahead and bring you in, sir, if you're still with us. Your letter that you sent in for boys basketball is on page 41. Let's start there, and just any further comments that you have about why Democracy Prep feels it's better fitted for the 5A and boys basketball. Mr. Gibson,
First, I want to say, do you hear me?
Yes.
Jason Gibson, athletic director here at Democracy Prep. First, I want to say thank you to everybody. We appreciate you hearing us out. We want to express our intent as far as to go up from the 3A to the 5A. We feel like our teams demonstrated a bit of growth, resilience, and competitiveness. To us, it's not about accolades or championships, but for us, it's about pride, platforms, and opportunities. Greater exposure helps with securing scholarships. We believe wholeheartedly in that. And our strength of schedule, we feel as though kind of speaks to our competitive nature. We think that we can be competitive at the 5A level. We've demonstrated that over, the course of time of us being, a basketball program. Again, I think that it's a good thing for, 4A got 36 teams and 5A only has 8 at the moment. So we're kind of trying to skip past that big big clunk of teams or whatnot. So we think that the 5A is a perfect fit for us. We've been participating and competing with them over the summer and even in league. As we, have non-conference games and things like that, and we feel confident in our team as well as the amount of talent that we have coming up through our middle school program. As you know, we are in the playoffs again this year. Last year won championship as far as middle school also, so we have a strong pipeline coming up. So we do feel very confident in our basketball program.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go a little bit out of order here, but since we've got you here right now, I'm going to go ahead and have you speak on your girls basketball program. Again, these are 2 separate votes, but your girls basketball program obviously has been 5A for this last cycle. You just got to the championship game in 5A this year, and that was, tell you what, with a few minutes to go in that game, it was still anybody's game at that point. So, Mr. Gibson, I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about your girls basketball program and why you feel it's best to stay 5A there as well.
I think when I first came to you guys a few years ago, coming out of the 2A to go to 5A, everybody didn't understand why we want to go to 5A, and we had that same amount of confidence that I do in my boys program and my girls program. And I seen the fact that with that pipeline, we were scheduled to be one of the greatest teams, and I still think we're one of the greatest teams in the state of Nevada. I think that that will, and my coaches, my leadership of my coaches, leadership of the team, and the the youthfulness of the team. They're very young, as well as we have a pipeline in that also. And going to, like you said, the state championship, playing even Centennial and getting to overtime, we lost 74-72 in the regular season. I think that competitiveness and that competitive balance is what everybody on the phone call understands and wants to see the state get back to, being able to compete at that level and continuously have games that we can go back and forth with to hopefully create rivalries and, bring that spunk back into the city. I think basketball as a whole has seen a change with the culture and bringing people out. Like I said, those rivalries, not to bring news in it and things like that, but we're bringing the spotlight back on basketball in Las Vegas. And I think that this is the place to do so. And I appreciate our girls for leading the way for that. And I think that they deserve, and I feel like they earned a spot in the 5A.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Ms. Blake's also Assistant Athletic Director, Democracy Prep. She's with us on this call. Ms. Blake, anything you'd like to add to what Mr. Gibson has presented?
No, Coach Gibson pretty much presented it all. We just really believe in our scholars and our basketball programs and feel that they'll be able to thrive in the 5A. So I completely agree with Coach Gibson and what he said.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Any questions for Democracy Prep of our committee or from our committee regarding their appeal here, wanting to go to 5A in both boys and girls basketball? Committee members, anything you'd like to ask or any comments you'd like to make? Mr. Jackson, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on this. No, I'm looking at it from my standpoint. Again, you guys can see the rubric numbers. To me, there's probably not an easier decision on the board today that we're going to make than to say to have Democracy Prep go up to 5A in both of these. That said, we would look for a motion here to accept Democracy Prep's appeal to move to 5A. I can't tell you how to make this motion. You don't have to put boys and girls together. You can make it for one. We should probably do it for one at a time, in all honesty. Let's focus on boys first. Do we have a motion to approve?
Dallas Carson, 3A South. I will make the motion that the Democracy Prep boys basketball program be moved to the 5A for this realignment.
Mr. Larson with the motion to move Democracy Prep to 5A in boys basketball. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzing, 4A 5A South, I second.
Mr. Larson with a motion, Mr. Polzin with a second. Any further questions or any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion passes. Let's turn to girls basketball for Democracy Prep. We'd entertain a motion to approve the appeal here as well.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will make the motion to allow Democracy Prep girls basketball to be placed in the 5A for this realignment.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Only Posing for a 5A South, I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table from Mr. Larson, a second from Mr. Polzin to accept Democracy's appeal in girls basketball to move to the 5A. Any further questions or any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'd just like to thank Jason. I know he reached out to me before this all happened, and we let us know of his intentions in this, which made it a lot easier for me as a 3A South member to know about it and talk with people beforehand. So thank you, Jason, for reaching out and kind of laying the groundwork for that.
Mr. Larson,
Thank you, Paul.
we need to squeeze in real quick. Anybody opposed to this? Okay, perfect. Yes, Mr. Gibson, Ms. Blake, thank you for following the process here. Thank you for being proactive on this. Your basketball programs will be placed in the 5A pending our board approval at the next board meeting. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Okay, we have one more appeal to hear today. It is from GV Christian School. And I believe Mr. Rollwing from GV Christian is with us today. They're appealing up in boys basketball from the 2A to the 3A. Again, this is a little tricky in that we don't normally have this type of appeal come out of the 2A, but I'm going to leave this one in the hands of the committee, and I'm going to let Mr. Rollwing, if he's still here, explain the reason why GV Christian feels it's better off to go to 3A in boys basketball. Eric, are you here with us?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead, sir.
Three major things. First off, thank you guys for hearing this appeal. We obviously saw Incline's appeal a couple months ago, so it was something that we looked at as far as for boys basketball. The three main areas that I would look at and why we are seriously looking at this is we do have three levels. We have a varsity JV and a B team, which is hard for us to schedule for our B team at the 2A level because there are no 2A South members currently that have a 2A school. Also, competitive balance. You know, we have a lot of freshmen that were on our varsity team, and I'm going to use the Democracy Prep word, the pipeline coming through on our school. Our enrollment is growing. So by the end of this realignment cycle, we will be near 3A numbers as a whole. I don't know how close we'll be to that as far with the multiple. And then the third angle is I've been through this appeal process a few different times when I was at SHAP with soccer. And then obviously we moved up a level before we were asked from the 1A to the 2A last realignment cycle. So very familiar with the teams there. You know, in our non-conference, we have played Moapa Valley, we played Virgin Valley, we played Spring Creek. So we're familiar with the competition, and we believe that, you know, we'd be a good fit. We're not a pipeline for sure, no recruiting, nothing like that. We just have a K through 12 school where kids work their way from elementary to junior high to high school. And now that the school is really growing at the high school level, this is an area that for competitive balance, we think would be fitting.
Thank you. Before I open this up for questions or comments from our committee, we do have a letter from Mr. Fitzsimons, one of our 2A representatives on this committee, who was unable to be with us today. I'm going to read this into the record real quick, just so everybody understands as well. Please pardon my absence from today's meeting as I am in Washington, D.C. being a chaperone on a school trip. Tough gig, I know. I'm writing today in support of GV Christian and their choice to move from 2A to 3A in boys basketball only. I've had numerous conversations with our athletic administrator about what this move would entail. I feel that the letter is submitted into the packet will help answer any questions that you may have. From a league standpoint, the only issue we have is for scheduling, meaning we will still be scheduling GV Christian girls JV and varsity basketball games with the rest of our league. However, that's an easy issue to address. I know that Eric is a competitor and he understands this would be a 3-year cycle. They are also due to have an upswing in talent for their boys basketball program. This, mixed with the fact that they have already been competing versus current 3A teams in non-conference games, allows me to support this decision. I told Eric that I would support them in any choice they make. Please refer any questions to Ken Parker, the other Southern 2A representative on this realignment committee. That's from Mr. Fitzsimons from Lincoln County. Mr. Parker, I believe you are with us today. I've
Yes.
lost track. Thank you. Your thoughts on this also, sir?
I support it. They have a very competitive boys side of it. You do see a lot of numbers. We obviously can't schedule any of those lower games with them due to we don't have a third level. And I know that's part of growing the program. So we're supportive of it. If that's what they wanted to do, and we'll support that decision. I do see an uptick in their school, their numbers, kind of across the board.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Our 3A representatives on the board, both south and north. Any comments from you? Any thoughts from you on this one?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I apologize when I got the packet. I didn't scroll to the very bottom, so this one kind of caught me off guard when I heard it. So I've been trying to get some input from other people. I know when Incline came in, they came in both boys and girls, which make for them up there with travel and for obviously scheduling. I guess my question would why boys only, not boys and girls at this time for Green Valley Christian?
I believe it's girls volleyball and boys basketball is what Incline's doing, correct? I don't think they're girls basketball and boys basketball.
I do have them in girls basketball also, and that the schools will confirm that for me this week.
They're going to do that. They're going to try girls basketball too? Because on the last one in December, it was just those two though, correct?
We confirmed with the school that they were going to go with basketball across the board.
Okay. For us, our girls program, to answer Dallas's question, for us, our girls program is still developing on numbers. So we don't have a B team right now. So I think our enrollment numbers through the next realignment cycle will be there. And we believe we'll be either doing this again or our number for enrollment will force us into the 3A.
Other thoughts from our 3A representatives on the committee?
Jason Odegaard, 3A South. I want to second what Dallas said. I think it would be a no-brainer if you were bringing both to do both of them at the same time. For us, for scheduling purposes, and for the 2A for their scheduling purposes, it makes it a little bit cleaner. As far as the lower level, there are some struggles with lower level B teams, even in some of the 3A schools. And so we have talked about some workarounds and different types of scheduling for B teams, if that makes any difference.
I'll bring Mr. Anthium into this also as someone who is involved in the scheduling part of this. With that 3A being enrollment based now, was the plan, and Mr. Odegaard, Mr. Larson, again, feel free to chime in on this also. Was the plan to go back to some sort of boys girls double header, 4 to 6 games at one site, or does this kind of trip over that, or have we even gotten that far yet in terms of the scheduling planning?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I reached out to, me and Jason have talked, I reached out to Xavier about that exact thing this past week, and he talked about waiting till after realignment to actually do it. But yeah, we were hoping to get to more of what we did traditionally in the 3A, which is having the boys, girls same night, same gym, the crowds, the atmosphere that brings when you bring in both teams, if you will, on a night, and that for our administration, you know, the number of games that they have to do in a week per se. But obviously not a deal breaker, but it wouldn't obviously be much nicer to have, like, because the 3A right now, everyone in the 3A basketball wise is boys, and it's enrollment, so it's boys and girls both at this point.
Yeah, Mr. Larson, you said this won't be a deal breaker, and to me, it's not either. It doesn't preclude those teams that do have both boys and girls from still being able to schedule that way on nights they play each other. Let's use Boulder City and Moapa Valley, for instance. Well, let's use Pahrump and Moapa. You're both here in the room. You could still continue to do that just on the nights that you play GV Christian. That would be the boys only, or perhaps you could pick up a non-league game against a girls team and fill that in as well to have them come out. So I would think there are potentially, and I'm not trying to advocate one way or another here, but I think there are ways that you could certainly work around that.
And I'll jump in and say I don't want to speak for Eric, but Eric could also have his girls come up as a non-conference game, so that both could play on the same night if that's the direction that you'd want to go. Scheduling wise, I mean, I'm looking at right now. Currently, the boys are set with just 6 schools, so it's 10 games. If you go home and away, you're still gonna have to fill up that schedule anyways, and maybe it's a little bit easier. You're already gonna have 2 additional games with bringing GV Christian in the mix.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments from our committee?
Dallas Sargent, 3A South. And once again, this won't really change this one here, but I would really advise anyone going forward, to read like I talked about with Jason. We reached out, we talked. He let his intentions known to the 3A to me, and I was able to talk to the 3A before this happened. I apologize that I didn't get to the bottom of the packet and see that this was on there when it got sent out. So a little bit on me for not getting all the way through, clear to the bottom. But I would definitely recommend, so that there's more conversation had before a vote, where I'm trying to represent all of the schools in the 3A South on this vote. So just for anyone, it would just be nice to have that talk, and then I could talk personally with Green Valley and kind of get a better sense of where they are and their thoughts on this, as just WAPA Valley AD.
Mr. Posey, you got your hand up, sir.
Is it possible to table this and rehear this appeal next week with the other appeals after Dallas has had a chance to do research?
And they could bring it up.
Yeah, it's very possible. If that's what this committee wants to decide to do, yeah, it's absolutely possible that you could do that. If GV Christian wants to rethink and bring its girls in at that point too, again, not trying to lead anybody down any roads, but that's possible as well. We'll ask here what the flavor of the committee is. Let's open it up for a motion. We can either have a motion here to approve GV Christian's appeal, deny GV Christian's appeal, or table GV Christian's appeal. Any of those are options at this point.
I'm game for whatever 3A would like, because it has more effect on them than anyone.
Well, it sounds to me like they would prefer to have a little bit more time to research this and speak to their member schools. I'll make a motion that we, Tony Polsing, 4A5A South, I make a motion that we table this appeal until the next meeting to hear it again and give the 3A South more time to research their membership and see kind of where they stand on that. Because I'm with Tammy, I'm with whatever they want, but I'd like to give them more time to figure out what they want.
Okay, we have a motion on the table from Mr. Polzian to table this appeal until next week's appeals meeting and hear it again at that point. Do we have a second?
Rob Cottrell, 3A North. I second that motion.
Motion for Mr. Polzian, a second from Mr. Cottrell. We would table GV Christian's appeal until next week's meeting and hear it at that point. Any further questions or any discussion?
Yeah, can I, Jason, you'd be able to get out a little Google form or something to get the 3A South. And Rob, I mean, as a 3A North, you're part of this as well. Would you be able to get any input from the 3A North on this as well?
I will today.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
And I'm sorry, once again, I'm sorry we had to delay this, but I do like giving me just a little bit more time before making a vote on this.
In all honesty, Dallas, I don't think there's any issue with that at all. It's one more week. It's not going to change a whole lot of things. So let's go forward here, and all in favor of this tabling this appeal, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm probably going to need a few more voices than this. Please make sure everybody's unmuted. And again, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 There's a little bit more of a wave. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Rolling, if you would hang with us until next week, then we will hear your appeal then. I will keep your letter. We will have that in the packet for the next one. We'll leave it up to you in terms of anything you would wish to change going forward.
Right. I just want to, Dallas, I'll reach out to you. I'm sorry. We did our due diligence on the 2A side. I didn't think about the 3A side. I will reach out to you with that. And we are definitely open to play 3A non-conference girls games. But I'll reach out to you privately. Thank you guys. Thank you for hearing this.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, that concludes item number 10. Item number 11 is the review of the winter sports placements for the fall 25 through spring 28 alignment cycle. It's everything we just passed and those two appeals from Democracy Prep to move into the 5A. So those again are on pages 26 through 39 of your packet. So we would entertain again a motion to approve those winter sports placements with the Democracy Prep appeals included.
Tony
Jason
Foley,
Odick.
4A5A South. Sorry, Jason.
Go ahead, Tony.
I'll make a motion that we approve the winter sports placements as agreed upon today with the addition of Democracy Prep's boys and girls basketball teams moving from 3A into 5A.
Thank you, Mr. Polzing. Do we have a second?
Jason Odegaard, 3A South, I'll second.
Motion on the table for Mr. Polzing and a second for Mr. Odegaard approving the motions or approving the placements as presented to the committee. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. That ayes have it there. We're going to skip over item number 12 because there's really anything to discuss there in terms of placement of 3A schools for the fall 25. We've had that discussion. We're through it. Item number 13, review of winter and spring meeting dates for the realignment committee. This is discussion only. We have approved these dates in our last meeting. Our next meeting is March 5th. We will hear appeals from the winter sports. We will also need to do our tournament formats for the fall and winter. I anticipate that being a little bit longer of a meeting. Those appeals for winter sports will rehear GV Christian, and we're looking at those appeals for those 4A schools that want to go to 5A, 5A they want to go to 4A based on what came out today. This will get sent out. All the recommended and now approved by this committee alignments will be sent out to schools tonight. It will be in everybody's hands so that they can see it along with the instructions on if they wish to appeal, what it is they need to do. It will be available on our website as well. That's the next few hours of my life. As we move forward, spring sports, again, we're looking at May 21 for our placements and May 28th for the appeals for spring sports and for our tournament formats for spring. Keep in mind, our winter alignments are not set until and unless the Board of Control approves them at the next board meeting, which off the top of my head, it's in April. Mr. Jackson, do you remember the dates? April Fool's Day and April 2nd, April 1 and 2. Mr. Larson, I thought you had your hand up there for a minute.
I was thinking boys volleyball, but that's spring, so I'm assuming we'll be covering that in the spring. Okay.
Sorry, we will.
Did you,
Any other questions or comments on item number 13?
what day did you say, the 5th?
March 5th, 5.
Oh, I had it down for the 6th. Okay.
And we ended up sliding off the 6th, I think, because you guys had some softball and baseball tournaments that were starting up that day, if I remember correctly. Okay, item number 14, committee member comments for the good of the order. Anybody with anything to add? Going once, going twice.
All of our meetings, our future meetings start at 9, correct?
Unless I hear from this committee that you'd prefer them to start at another time, yes, that would be
I just want to
my.
make sure it's calendared at start, right start time.
Yep. Does that work for everybody? 9 a.m.?
Next week is a Zoom then, Bart?
Yes, our remaining meetings will be by Zoom, yes. So those of you like Mr. Baldwin in remote areas of the world don't have to worry about putting more miles on the car. Okay, let's go to item number 15, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. I don't see anybody out in the main room here, so I don't think we've got any live public comment here. I am not seeing any in my email. Ms. Wonder, if you are still with us from Parts Unknown in the other room, do you have any public comment that has come your way?
Negative.
Anybody from any of our sites across the state have anybody wishing to make public comment? I am hearing none. Item number 16 is adjournment at 11:02 on this Wednesday, February 26th, 2025. Our meeting of the Realignment Committee for 2025 to 2028 is hereby adjourned. Thank you for all your work, everyone. We'll see you in a week.
All right.